Welcome back, everyone. We have a report from Law and Crime Network on accused mass shooter Frank Robert James. It says, quote, defense lawyers for Frank Robert James, the man accused of committing a mass shooting on a New York City subway train, are trying to move his trial to an Illinois federal court. They argue that the substantial law enforcement and media attention on the incident prejudiced him at trial by tainting the local New York City pool. In the defense attorney's report, they took a far leap and blamed the media and politicians for, quote, inflammatory and inadmissible information about Mr. James, which resulted in, again, a biased jury, they say. There are many questions surrounding this case, so I want to bring on criminal defense attorney Bob Bianchi to discuss this. He joins me right now. Bob, what is the latest on this case? Is Frank Robert James going to successfully have his trial moved?
No, but I will say, Addison, I'll take my usual conservative law enforcement position and say something that I think needs to be said here. It was one thing when they were putting out on social media, look, we're looking for this individual, here's who he is. We need community partners to help us solve crimes and to convict people. What happened, though, was the day afterwards, the mayor then blasted out to millions of people using the term, we got him, and using all sorts of negative things about him to the potential jury pool. And this is the argument that the defense is making, that was unnecessary, and the media that followed that prejudiced the potential jury pool, that they're using a rule that says if a person can't get a fair and impartial jury, then the judge should change its venue. Now, I just from my former prosecutor days, we were very, very careful once we made an arrest not to do anything to prejudice the potential jurors in the court of public opinion. So this was a misstep by the mayor and by law enforcement and by the prosecutors who are supposed to make sure things like this don't happen. And why don't you want things like this to happen? So that you don't create appellate issues in your case. So that said, I don't think it will be successful for the reason that social media is what it is today. And while the defense makes an argument that by using the term we, he's basically the mayor indicating that collectively they're working together, I think the judge would still be able to ferret out on a case-by-case basis with each individual juror any prejudices they would have. And listen, Addison, many times people come, last point, as a juror to you, and they know about the case, they've heard about the case. It's a famous case. We cover them all the time at the Law and Crime Network and with you. And they say, can you be fair and impartial and base the case on the evidence you hear in the court as opposed to what you know about the case? And if the juror says yes and the judge is convinced, that person sits on the jury. So I don't think it's going to be successful, but it was a misstep.
Now, Bob, speaking of fair and impartial, that every time I have you on the show, you're very down the middle, you're very, very unbiased and as impartial as it gets. That was a quick no from you, Bob. I'm a bit surprised that Frank Robert James's lawyers would even be trying this, just judging off of your response to it, your quickness to point out that this is so silly and so frivolous.
They're done in extraordinarily rare circumstances, to the point that I was just saying before, because the judge has other alternative means to make sure that a fair and impartial jury is selected. It may take the court a lot longer because of some of the things that were done. It may cause an appellate issue down the road should there be a conviction, which no court or prosecutor should want. Nevertheless, the court is capable on its own of making sure they get 12 independent jurors who can be fair and impartial right here in good old New York City, as opposed to having to go to Illinois. Not happening.
Now, Bob, another thing I want to get your comment on. We have this headline from Law and Crime Network. Trump appeals, quote, overly broad, overreaching, and unenforceable order, putting his business empire under court monitoring. Can you talk to me a little bit about this? Overly broad, overreaching, unenforceable. Is Trump correct here? Does he have a case for those claims?
He certainly can make those claims. You know, the devil's in the details with these things, Addison. Whenever you do a law enforcement action or any action against a business or a person, and under the law, a corporation is considered a person, it's kind of a legal technicality, it's got to be reasonably tailored to achieve the objective that government is seeking to do without overreaching, would be the term that we would use in that particular circumstance. So it makes sense to appeal the ruling and to nail down what it is and see if you can get a court to say, you know what, we're going to reverse this or modify it, which is very possible in an appellate situation. But this obviously has to be exhaustively decided by the appellate division judges and appellate courts, and you can be assured that both sides are going to be fighting vociferously for advocating for their position as they've done already in this case.
Now, there's been a pretty big push to kind of exile Trump from doing any business at all in New York. This appears to be just another one of those. How do you foresee this? A little bit of a prediction. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but considering everything going on right now with Donald Trump, he's probably going to be announcing his run for president. That's going to have everyone up in a fuss. Do you actually think that he'll be successfully barred, essentially, from doing real estate in New York, doing business in New York, or do you think he'll be significantly restrained when this is all said and done?
When it comes to the President Trump, Addison, I don't give legal predictions any longer. I try to do it based on because he's an anomaly in the law. So I'll answer the question this way. Typically speaking, debarment, which is the process to stop a business from continuing to operate, happens all the time on facts far less significant than what we have alleged here. It is a common and ordinary technique that the government uses very successfully. But then again, I get back to the point that there are many things that have been done that just sometimes just don't apply. And obviously, we understand when you're talking about a president or a former president, prosecutorial authorities and judicial authorities, for some reason, are a little hesitant in terms of doing what they normally do day in and day out with John Q. Public. So who knows?
Yeah, who knows? And Trump's an anomaly to the law. I'd have to say I agree with you there, Bob Bianchi from Law & Crime Network. Always great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for breaking all this down.
Of course.